Shalom, a video about American Jewish history. It started in 1654 when 23 Jews were fleeing Brazil from persecution. They didn't want to end up in America, but they tried other places and were not permitted. In fact, when they got to New Amsterdam, which is New York today, Peter Stuyvesant, the governor, didn't want to let them in. But he was overruled by his company, the West Indies Company, because they had some Jewish investors. Lucky for the Jews. Jews were petty traders pretty much at the beginning, and they did not go to college. They were more interested in business, which is ironic because today 85% of Jews go to college, higher education, which is the highest percentage of any ethnic group in the United States. There was anti-Semitism in America at that time, but Jews were still freer here than they were anywhere else in the world by far. So what happened? They continued then to live and didn't have much Jewish education. There were no rabbis here. Chaim Solomon, the financier of the revolution, told his nephew to stay in Poland if he valued Jewish learning. He himself could read Hebrew a little bit, Chaim Solomon, but bemoaned the fact there was little Yiddishkeit in America. But on the positive side, Jews felt incredibly free. The Puritans were not tolerant of Jews. They were intolerant of anyone, thought that everything else was heresy. During the Revolution, Jews thought of themselves as Americans, began to build synagogues and charities. In fact, when President Washington was inaugurated, the Charleston Synagogue sent him congratulations, and he wrote back, "May the same temporal and eternal blessings which you implore for me rest upon your congregation." In 1800, there were just 2,500. 1800, there was a vast increase in the number of Jews. In 1700, there were just 250 Jews. By 1860, already there were 250,000 Jews. In the meantime, before that, in the Revolution in 1776, there were about 2,500 Jews. So you can see from 250 to 2,500 by the Revolution to 250,000 by the time right before the Russian Jews started coming in the late 1800s. The German Jews came, first the Spanish-Portuguese Jews came, and then the German Jews in the middle of the 19th century. There were significant restrictions increased on German Jewry at that time, and so they started coming. So they came pretty much a full generation before the Eastern European immigration started. And that started pretty much because of pogroms in mass actions of anti-Semitism under the Tsar in Russia. So what was Jewish life like then? Well, in 1802, you have the first Ashkenazic synagogue in Philadelphia. 1814, the first Hebrew Bible published here. 1841, the first permanent Reform synagogue. But by the end of the century of the 1800s, there were several significant Jewish organizations founded, including the Jewish Theological Seminary, the National Council of Jewish Women, the Yiddish Daily Forward, which is still printed in English, the Union of Jewish Orthodox Congregations, the Reformed Central Conference of American Rabbis, and others. So what was the contribution of Jews during that period? Well, by the end of the 20th century, Jews were president of not only Yeshiva University, the Jewish Theological Seminary, and Hebrew Union College, but also of Harvard, Princeton, and Columbia. And there were quotas at one time against Jews, but Jews today can enter any college their parents want them to attend, of course, if they can get in. And colleges have more Jewish faculty members, much higher percentage than their minority status would indicate. In terms of music, for example, think about the renowned soloists Heifetz, Menuhin, Rubinstein, Horowitz, Stern, Perlman. At one time, conductors of almost all the major orchestras were Jews: Bruno Walter, Eugene Ormandy, George Zell, George Solti, etc. Think about the popular contribution of Jews to music: Irving Berlin, Harold Arlen, Jerome Kern, Lerner and Lowe, Rodgers and Hammerstein, to name a few. Think about in opera, you have Jan Pierce and Reuben Tucker, whose names were changed from Jacob Perlmuth and Reuben Ticker. Think about the contribution of Jews in science and medicine. If you look at the Nobel Prizes, Jews constitute a tiny percentage of the world population, but about 15% of the Nobel Prizes and just think about Sabin and Salk, for example, the polio vaccine. In business and finance, you have names like Strauss, Warburg, Loeb, Lehman, Guggenheim. Through that whole century, and in retail merchandising, it was Bamberger, Altman, Saks, Rosenwald of Sears. Sarnoff of NBC and Paley of CBS were two giants in the development of radio and mass communication. The Jewish family Ox for the New York Times. Jewish Nobel Prize winners Isaac Bashevis Singer. Now, free immigration in the United States stopped in 1924, then continued after the Holocaust. Think about the Supreme Court. Two Jews on the Supreme Court today. There's been nothing like America for Jews ever in Jewish history. And I think to celebrate American Jewish life.